banger coming up this weekend with 19 finishes and 23 combined wins. We have the Canadian Powerbar representing Gatineau, Quebec, Canada, Marc-Andre Barriault.
Fired up.
And he's going to be taking on the Cuban Missile Crisis, Julian Marquez. And for Marquez, we were supposed to see him back in November, and I'll throw the tweet up there. He's supposed to take on Deron Winn. Deron Winn fell, had an accident, and the UFC cut him. Let that sink in.
Tough.
They don't care about Deron Winn. DC does, UFC doesn't. Now, Deron Winn was forced out of many bouts, and for Julian Marquez, this is a guy that injuries obviously derailed a large portion of his career, and he's only 9-3, and it feels like Julian Marquez has been around and on everybody's radars. You know, MMA fans, people in the dirty movie business, podcast business. Julian Marquez is that guy, and he's got a positive record in the UFC, and he's beaten names equal to or better than Marc-Andre Barriault. I mean, think about it. Back on Contender Series, he's fighting Phil Hawes. He's beating Phil Hawes. He cracks him. Then he lands a head kick. Face plants Hawes. Big winner. And again, he's had fight of the nights, the performance bonuses. Marquez has been able to do that. And if you look at it for his opponent here out of Quebec, you look at Marc-Andre Barriault, former TKO middleweight champ. He goes up to light heavyweight. He fights Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada's Adam Hunter, who was supposed to be in the UFC at one point. They have an absolute barn burner. And it's Barriault getting on top, landing ground and pound to the point where Hunter's out at the end of the fight. So big wins for both of these guys. Obviously for Barriault in the UFC, if you consider it, I say he's 4-5. UFC, real record, 3-5 with a no contest because the win over Oscar Piatto was overturned. But if you do look at it for both of these guys, a lot of finishes between them. And we touched on it in the Ian Garry fight. What's the guy's ceiling? What's the guy's floor? If you look at it just like numbers on a page, you look at it that way, I would say, okay, Marquez at his best is going to grind out wins. He's going to beat some of the better guys. At his worst, he's getting dropped 3 times in a first round against Gregory Rodriguez. They say 3 numbers on a page. I counted 4 drops for Rodriguez in the first round. And for Marc-Andre Barriault, at his best, he's beating Adam Hunter and looking amazing for the second belt. At his worst, he hits an overhand right from Chidi Njokuani and 16 seconds in, the fight's over.
I gotta be honest, I think a lot higher of Barriault at this stage of his career than I do Marquez. And I might be wrong for this, but for Marquez, his wins haven't been over the greatest of guys. Now, the Darren Stewart fight I do think is a great win.
Fight of the night right there.
And it was a great back and forth affair. Like, that's a great fight to go back and watch. I really do recommend it because Stewart may have lost, but it was still a good Darren Stewart last night, if you don't, or that night, not last night. Because he lands great shots against Julian Marquez, really nice boxing combinations.
Did you go to the dentist last night?
Yeah, maybe. But Marquez was able to weather a big storm and then look good as that fight went on. But my issue with Marquez is, and that's why I push back a little bit against he could look good against any of the top guys, his other 2 wins are Maki Bitolo, who is a talented fighter, but not a varied fighter, not the most well-rounded of fighters out there, and Sam Alvey.
That was a barn burner.
It was, but Sam Alvey is Sam Alvey. I just think for Marquez, he gets hit far too much, and I think for a lot of his career, his toughness was able to carry him past a lot of adversity, and he was able to eat a lot of big shots and look good as a result. I just worry that that level of durability is still there, and I understand fighting Gregory Rodriguez is one thing. Like, he's a heavy-handed guy who's going to knock out a lot of fighters, but Marquez's chin was able to keep him into a lot of fights. And I'm not going to tell you Barriault's the biggest puncher by any means, but he can land clean shots on the outside. He's going to damage you with his boxing combinations before he goes to his wrestling. I just think if Marquez isn't able to have success on the outside in this matchup, I definitely don't think he's going to have success on the inside apart from some submission attempts. So I think Marquez is really going to have to show us something a little bit different. Maybe a little bit more kicks like you did show in the Phil Hawes fight, because he will throw kicks to the head, but there's not a high volume of kicks, and I think that's the issue for him. He's going to have to keep Marc-Andre Barriault at bay in this fight, and I just worry about how he's going to be able to do that.
Barriault's one of those guys that he made the move to Southern Florida, training at a Hillcliff FC, like a lot of fighters on this card. And again, we've already mentioned it, but Brendan Allen and the like in the divisions. I mean, Aung Lan Sung's trained there forever, middleweight champ for the longest time, over with one championship.
So many good fighters for a while.
And for Barriault, we saw him really highlight his highs. We saw him go out there, really clinch guys, really wear on their gas tank, kind of fighting the Blagoy Ivanov type of fight where you're just burning guys out, and then you're going out there and finishing very, very well, like his fight against Abu Zaitser, Potato Gate. That was Ottman. His win over Dalcho Lungiambula, where he's able to go out there and just kind of keep and weather the storm and keep the pressure. His losses I mentioned to Njokuani. Then he had a wild fight and a win over Jordan Wright. And then his last time out against Anthony Hernandez. I'm not going to sit here and lie. I picked Barriault to beat Hernandez. And I thought, okay, Barriault, good takedown defense. We've seen it in the UFC. We saw it with TKO. And sure enough, Alexander Hernandez went out there and made it a wrestling clinic, and Marc-Andre Barriault looked like I don't know, a sturgeon floating down the St. Lawrence. I'm trying to make Quebec references here.
St. John.
I could have said a beluga too, but for Barriault, he really did struggle in that aspect. And Julian Marquez, likewise, good grappler in his own right. Now, he's since switched camps, and he's training at Factory X, and he's been there for quite some time. And you talk about bigger fighters to get ready for a fight like this. Rob Wilkinson, did he win $1 million last year with PFL?
He did.
He did. He trains there. Dustin Jacoby, who strikes on the outside? Jacoby does. And then the best guy that Marquez can train with out of that gym that fights at middleweight is Cody Brundage. And Cody Brundage can be there in that camp and is in that camp, and there's pictures of them on Instagram that can replicate a style like Barriault. So both these guys have really kind of had to rely on their toughness and durability more than some other fighters. It definitely does wear down on the power bar, no pun intended. But this is a tough fight to try and make a pick on, because for Marquez, heavier handed, more varied attacks. He is definitely more of a finisher. And if you look at it for Barriault, he's usually able to withstand a lot of that. In majority of his fights, but against Joe Kwani, who just rushed in there and landed that overhand right, Barriault fell like a sack of patat, and then he went in there for the kill, didn't Joe Kwani? Matt, you think the Quebecers are happy with this one?
It all depends on who they're going to pick.
All right, slight favorite Barriault.
Yes.
Slight underdog Marquez. Topology vote. Surprised us there to you. I'm going to say over-under because one guy's a fan favorite, one guy's not. I think the fans, I'm going to say over-under 65% are going with Julian Marquez here.
I was going to say 60 Marquez. I'm going to say under, though.
You're going to say under? It's over. Look at that. 1,388 total votes. 67% Marquez, 19% by decision, 18% by submission, 56% by knockout. For the 33% that have Barriault, 57% by decision, 26% by knockout if my eyes are doing the job. So, Matt, when you look at this fight, slightly the favorite is Barriault, but the fans have Marquez fairly overwhelmingly.
And I'm the underdog, too. I feel like I've spent half this video ranking on Julian Marquez, but I do think he's the more damaging of the two. And I think he's going to be able to keep this fight on the feet for more than half the round, let's say. So if he's able to damage Barriault for at least half the round, and let's say he spends the other bit on his back, I think he'll be able to threaten with submissions a little bit, which will make it uncomfortable for Barriault in the top position. I don't think he's going to be able to consistently out-grapple Barriault, I will admit that, but I do think Marquez is the more damaging of the two on the feet. For that reason, I do have him in the matchup. Now, I gotta be honest, I don't love Julian Marquez moving forward against a lot of the top guys in this division. I do believe, though, stylistically, this is a decent matchup for him, and as a slight underdog, I don't mind picking him.
Well, and that's a weird thing. Like, numbers on a page, you obviously had Marquez struggling with the takedowns against Darren Stewart, but he finished him. He struggled against Manzo. Alessio Di Chirico is no longer in the UFC. He retired, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And Maki Pitolo. But the Pitolo fight was off a really long layoff. He was getting his legs back into it. It's a tough one. For me, I like the durability. I like the lasting ability of a guy like Marc-Andre Barriault. So I'm going to go with Quebec's own. You're going to go with the man that's represented a multitude of cities, but this time training out of Colorado, in Julian Marquez. Really eager to hear from you folks down below in the comment section on this one. Very volatile matchup in the middleweight division. Brunson's taking on, holy smokes, Dricus du Plessis. That's also in this card. There's some great fights in and around these divisions. You're not going to want to miss them. Keep them locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.